We're joined by Sam Logan. Sam Logan is a former classmate of mine. Well, our classmate, but I don't think we had classes together. We attended college at the same time
Yeah,
at
yeah,
the Maranatha Baptist University. At the time, Maranatha Baptist Bible College, and we're going to be going over a lot of things about our culture that are probably going to be unique to most people. It's hard to explain the background that we have if you weren't there to actually experience it. But before we get started, Sam, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and like how you grew up and where you grew up and your philosophy in life?
Oh, okay, yeah. As far as where I grew up, yeah, pretty straightforward kindergarten to 12th grade all through college at a Christian fundamental Baptist education. And yeah, very much in that bubble from day one. Very Republican, very Christian, very uh King James-ish for a bit, depending in some circles. And for those who know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Um, and yeah, very much going to church 3 times a week, Wednesday, twice on Sunday. Yeah, that was my life for quite a bit from the beginning. Yeah.
The the King James thing you mentioned, for those of you who aren't aware, there was a sect. It's a lot smaller now. It's a lot
Yeah.
smaller now than it was 25, 30 years ago, who were adamant on the idea that other Bible versions other than the King James version were off the table. Like the King James Bible in English
Yeah.
is they call it the authorized version, which I gotta say, even when I was a dyed in the wool fundamentalist Baptist, never made sense to me. Never made any sense at all. I never bought it for a second. And I didn't even know about the fact that the King James Bible was written in 1611 and altered 7 or 8 times since then. That if you read an actual 1611 Bible, it's a lot more difficult to understand. But like the idea that God, if you were to assume that God's word is the actual authoritative word of God, and it's in different languages, why would one translation in one particular language have any more weight than another? It never made sense to me.
But yeah, that was one of the influences in my life that I know that I had uh that I loosened up on. Of I mean, the Bible is still important to me, but it I don't find other versions to be offensive. Whereas before I was like, oh no, it was just it was right up there with everything else of just doing the with the Ten Commandments and everything else. Like this was the way to go. Um, it was to if your Bible didn't have the these and thous in there, you just weren't doing it right, man.
I know, right? It's. I remember when I was in high school, we went to some camp in Arkansas, and there was a speaker there, and he said that he would he uses the pages of the NIV Bible as toilet paper. And I went to my pastor at the time, and I was like, I mean, doesn't that kind of seem out of line here? Like, even if you think the NIV is an imperfect translation like that, and I was like, why would you say that? Like, to be that hardcore about one particular translation, not even the first English translation, by the way. Like, there were other English translations before that, and you had William Tyndale and John Wycliffe. I mean, people have been working on this for years, and
Yeah.
like no one that wrote the Bible spoke English. Why do we care so much about it? It never made sense to me.
Right. Now it kind of depends on especially when you're arguing about what changes. Now I understand if things are consciously being changed not for translation reasons, but just like out of like preference. Like I'd heard something about didn't Thomas Jefferson take out, or somebody, maybe it was Thomas
Yeah,
Jefferson, somebody took out like all of like all the references to blood or things like that out of the Bible. I may be making this up, but that type of thing where you're not doing it for translation reasons, but more like out of preferential reasons. you're cutting things up, taking things out just because you don't like it. And when, in fact, why they did things like make the New King James Version, why they did a lot of stuff, was to make it more understandable.
Yeah.
They realized in certain points along the way, hey, people aren't connecting with this, people aren't understanding this, and they have to in order to, follow the faith. So it makes sense to make it more understandable.
Yeah.
That's not now. Now you can get into other things, and there is other, hypocrisies and things that you can point out. You can point out that people, print this in order to make a bunch of money, which is also true. But but as far as making it more understandable, you'd think that's God's work, not the devil's.
Yeah, you're referring to the Jefferson Bible. That's a real thing. Thomas Jefferson, he took the New Testament and he removed all of any mention of the supernatural, like anything that couldn't possibly exist in the natural world, and compiled, what he could from that. And it was the Jefferson Bible, which no one would ever count as a scholarly, interpretation of the Bible at all. But yeah, so that's true. I will say this though. The King James Version is my favorite version to quote, because I find the prose beautiful. Like I do. I find like the actual the way the words flow, and it has an old-timey ring to it.
Yeah,
And saying, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life, in like modern vernacular is not going to hit as well. It's not. And it's like, yeah, there is something to that. So like
yeah,
I think that's really what it is, that
yeah.
people.
It's a style preference.
Yes,
It comes off more authoritative.
it does. It
Um,
does.
on top of, yes, it being, I think, the poetry of it. I think that's probably one of the reasons why I think I probably ended up floating to Shakespeare so much. Again, a lot of writing from the 1600s that has this, I don't know, great picture and also authoritative. There's a profoundness to it that you get, as opposed to, yeah, putting it in a more modern vernacular of God died a long time ago and he did it for you.
Yeah. I remember seeing this article, and I was in college. I worked security in college, and there was this website. I think it was called Listverse that I went to. No, it was Cracked. It was cracked.com. And
Oh yeah.
someone wrote an article where they replaced every instance of the word behold in the Bible with look buddy. And it was hilarious. It was just like, look, buddy, unto you this day is born a child in a manger. Hilarious. But I mean, like, it's just like, yeah, it's we'll get into that later on. But it's like that wasn't the first crack in the armor for me, but it was just so ridiculous that, and only like old people seem to believe. I even like the arguments for it too. I remember talking to this guy who was younger than me, and he said that, well, the King James Bible is correct, because the Bible says that you purify silver 7 times, and it's it's the best it can be, and the King James Bible has been updated 7 times. It's like that is the dumbest argument. In a strong field of competition, that is the dumbest argument I have ever heard. Like, so you're saying it was
Yeah.
bad on number 6 and it will be bad on number 8? It's just like, God, like
Yeah.
the mental gymnastics you have to do to buy into that is just nonsense. But anyway, I wanted to get to you more about your personal stuff. Like, so I don't know like exactly like what your religious views are now, and I'll go first with mine. Is that I don't believe in a deity or deities at all, and I have been fascinated to watch the evolution of my compatriots that grew up in this religious sect, and seeing how they splintered off. And so where do you fall on the spectrum?
Yeah, and by the way, I'm not surprised to where you're at, because I've thoroughly enjoyed your TikToks and everything, and hearing from your perspective of where you're at. I found it interesting, even if I'm, not coming from that. I'm not. I'm in a different place. I still find your insights very interesting, by the way. Um, where at least where I'm at, I do go to church on Sunday. I had, though my religious views have kind of moved differently in the area of, at least in the bubble that I grew up in, I don't see the world as a scary place. I don't see people who think different than me as the enemy. And I don't see God as closed-minded as the people who instructed me.
Hmm.
There is a lot of fear that is taught in Christianity, at least from what I was growing up in. There was less be like Christ, and there was more like don't be like the world. Don't wear clothes like them. Don't act like them. Don't talk like them. There's a danger there. There was a lot of that. Whereas I found that that was a lot of superficial things that were emphasized. What I have found is that faith and religion is a more personal, individual thing. It's something that has to start from within and be there. It has to be mine. What I found is Christianity kind of goes in three different stages. You have your, if you grow up the way I did, you have your parents' faith, then you have your church's faith, and then you have yours. Because I think you might have noticed this phenomenon too. The Christianity that preached in church is different from the Christianity you would necessarily practice at home. And then there's the Christianity that you would experience for yourself and what you would individually practice. Especially once you are an adult and maybe being able to make your own decisions as freely as a person. Uh, so I found that to be the case. Also, that yeah, the world's just not that scary, and also I'm not scared that people think differently than me. Whereas before, uh, it was really put as a us versus them mentality. That if people didn't think the way we believed, that they were, we're in a spiritual battle, brother, and you can't, associate with these people. You can't work with these people. They have to be avoided. They'll influence you. Um, so yeah, that's a bit where I'm from.
That's uh that's a very good synopsis. And there's a lot of points I want to hit on that. The first thing you mentioned was the fear. And one thing that I've noticed is that the old time religion, like the fire and brimstone stuff, has really fallen off. If you went to church in the 90s or early 2000s, you could pretty much bank on hearing a message about how the torments of hell would haunt you, or how your loved ones would suffer for eternity. And if you want to escape that, you need to follow the teachings of Christ and renounce your sin and all that stuff. But that that doesn't happen nearly as much anymore. Like now, it's more of I mean, I don't know if they still call it seeker friendly. That's what they called it back, in the days I remember. But that now it's like, hey, come follow Jesus, and he'll make your life better. And follow Jesus, and you'll experience more joy. And like they're leaning way more into the carrot than they are into the stick. And I that is incredible to me, because if you really do think that someone is going to be tortured for eternity, that's a good thing. Like, you're like, hey, listen, I need to warn you, like, you need to get
Yeah,
away from this.
yeah.
And but it's not working because it's incredibly off-putting. And one thing I like to, so whenever I talk to uh believers that I still know, and uh I ask them about hell, because hell is a really good topic, I think. And I'll ask them, listen, do you think, like, knowing me, the person you've known for 10, 15, 20 years, do you think that I am so evil that I deserve to be tortured and burned and eaten by maggots for eternity? Like, have my actions been so vile, so despicable that I deserve that? And the answer is always the same. The answer is, well, I mean, I just believe what God says. No, 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 no. I don't want to know like what God says. I'm asking you as a person. Like, if you were calling the shots, would you think that's a fair punishment? And they'll say, well, listen, I think I deserve it too. It's like, no, 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 no. I'm just saying, do you believe that is fair? The answer is no. The answer is an obvious no. That makes no sense at all. And everyone knows it. So they can't discard this teaching of hell because it's so ingrained into at least our version of Christianity. So they
Right.
try to preach the seeker friendly part. And what one that really gets me is when people they kind of dial back like how bad hell actually is. Like it's separation from God. It's not actually torment, it's just separation from God. And you'll be fine. You just won't be in the presence of God. It's like, okay, or hey, everyone goes to heaven anyway. It's like, okay, so then why bother following the religion? Like it's a house of cards that falls apart really quick whenever I have this discussion. Have you run across that? I don't even know your opinions on that. Like, what are your opinions on the afterlife?
Yeah, that one is. Yeah, that one is a tough one. Again, I do go with I believe that God is a more compassionate God than I've definitely been raised with. Uh, to make sense of hell, I really don't know. I can't. I do think it from everything that I've learned and understand about it, it does sound, it is the place that you know, that is made originally for Satan and the people that follow him from the beginning. Um,
Real quick
but
about
yeah,
that, real quick before you finish, like,
mhm,
did Satan deserve that too? Like, Satan offered a rebellion against God, and his
mhm.
punishment is eternal suffering. Like that, even that seems to be. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead. That
Well, as they say, when you come at the king, you better not
you
miss.
better not miss.
So if you don't take him down, yeah, you're gonna have to be put down. That's I think it was a pretty big swing that he took. So
Hey,
you're gonna
balls!
get it.
Respect the balls.
So it kind of goes both ways. If you're going to do that, you're going to get, he was going for, you know, that's a risk reward type of thing. So, but he was still given, if you think about it, Staten was still given a pretty good gig, kicked out of heaven. Yet he still gets to torture Job. He still gets to be in popular culture. He gets to still get to be perceived pretty cool,
He
and
gets to
he
be a
still
snake for a
no
little
set of
while.
followers. So how badly was the devil really punished? You know, there's still, I'm saying, God is more merciful than
More,
people
more.
assume.
I'll torture you for eternity, but check this out. You get to torture some poor old man for a couple of years. There you go. That's a good
He's
trade-off.
cool. I'm saying the devil gets he gets a pretty good gig. He gets, even Milton makes him his own main character, makes him pretty cool. So he didn't get, that badly punished. But yeah, I do have a hard time thinking about, yeah, I do have a hard time thinking about the God that I believe in sending so many people to hell as we've been raised, to, in our environment, that simply out of especially simply out of ignorance. I have a very hard time with anyone who has absolutely no knowledge of God whatsoever, has no opportunity to learn how to get to heaven whatsoever, would be sent to hell. That I have a very hard time with. Um, but yeah, and yeah, I have a very hard time with that. At the same time, I mean, I also have a hard time with Christians who throw out hell as as almost like a rhetorical argument of saying as not, and anytime it comes up, it should come up with a tear in their eye, not as a and you know what, you're going to hell, as saying anyone who disagrees with them, and you're going to hell. That I find incredibly distasteful. It shouldn't be something that is used as a comeback
Yeah.
or as a way of proving them right. I'm right because you're going to hell. That's not a debating technique. That's a personal perspective that they have, but it's not going to change the person's mind that you're talking to. Um, yeah,
And it has the, I mean, I was gonna say implicit, but the explicit suggestion that I'm gonna enjoy the fact that you're in hell since you
yeah,
disagree with me, which
yeah.
is not a new phenomenon. Like if you read, I think it was Tertullian and even it was either Augustine, yeah, and Augustine, they wrote that they believed that people in heaven would be able to look down into hell and watch the unbelievers in torment and take pleasure out of it. So like it was there for a very long time.
Right.
Um, the unknown, the people who don't know God thing was, I remember like that really bothered me too. Because I remember going to Dr. Saxon. I remember Dr. Saxon at our college,
Hmm.
and I brought the question to him, and I said, "Okay, so you're telling me that someone who has no knowledge of the gospel, they die and they still go to hell?" And I knew what the answer was going to be. He was going to reference Romans, where Paul says that, the look at the trees argument, that, yeah, you can tell by looking at the world that it has order and someone definitely created it, so they're without excuse. And I said, okay, all right, that's fine. I mean, like, pretty much every culture believes in God, like 90% of them. And so they got that part. But there's no way they could then deduce that, well, the right God is this, triune deity who spoke reality into existence and
Hmm.
came down to Bronze Age Palestine as his own son, and it's as a human sacrifice. Like, there's no way they could figure that out. And
Yeah.
the answer I always got was, well, listen, if they really wanted to know, God would have sent them a missionary. Like God wouldn't leave them hanging like that. And I thought, okay, that doesn't make any sense, because Jesus
Yeah.
gives the Great Commission,
Hmm.
and he says, go into all the world and preach the gospel, and doesn't bother to mention that there are two whole continents to these people, like millions of people, and say, oh yeah, by the way, make sure you get there so they can hear the message too. So for 1,500 years, you're telling me not a single person in North and South America had this actual yearning to know the true God, and all of them went to hell? There's no. And then I get answers like, well, you don't know, someone could have been. It's like, okay, fuck off, you're just making shit up now. Like, this is like this is nonsense. It's insane. uh and the Satan thing you talked about, the Satan story is interesting to me. So Satan is I think is a character that's evolved over time. Like, in the book of Job, like we attribute it to Satan, but it's like the Satan. It was a title, which explains why Satan's in heaven in the first place. It's weird, like looking at it through an English translation, like, because
Yeah.
Satan just means accuser. And so this angel, who was the accuser, the Satan, told God, hey, if we test this guy, he's going to fail. And it's been attributed to our Satan. And it's also funny that people would always say that, because I'd ask like, well, how come God doesn't show up? Just like show up and say, hey, here I am. I'm Yahweh. I'm Jehovah. I'm the God. I'm the right guy. And they say, well, listen, they had the prophets, they had Jesus and everything. So, if they didn't believe them, they wouldn't believe God showing us. I was like, I don't believe that. Like, I think I'm pretty sure that if God actually showed up again, and not say rely on stories from thousands of years ago, that, we wouldn't buy it. And then they say, well, if God just showed up, then it wouldn't be an act of faith anymore. People wouldn't believe. And I was like, okay, well, wait a minute, but Satan knew God. Like, Satan worked with the guy. Like, he knew his capabilities, he knew his
Hmm.
power, and he still rebelled. So, like,
Yeah.
why not give us that shot? Like, why only reserve it for angels? And it also calls in the question of the free will, because they say, well, you can't accept God, or you need life to have free will, so you can accept God, because if he's here, then your free will goes away. I say, well, when you get to heaven, you can't sin, so your free will is gone anyway. So, like, which one is it? Like, is it free will or is it not? So, the Satan story is very fascinating to me. He's like one of my favorite characters in all the Christian canon. Oh, did you freeze?
Yeah, yeah. I haven't heard you for a minute.
Oh shit! I'm sorry, you frozen. Okay, is my video coming through fine?
It is now. It was frozen before.
Oh shit! I'm sorry. What's the last thing you heard?
Last thing I heard was yeah, it was just about yeah, it was we were just getting into Satan. But yeah, but as far as if God, that's a good question that you bring up though. If God showed up today, um, my gut reaction is I don't think people would respond just because of just modern attitudes. We can't agree on anything. Why would we agree on even if God showed up? I mean, I think it would still be divisive. It would still be hashtag not my God.
It
It it
it
would still
it
people would
would
still.
it
I mean,
would
he would perform a miracle, and people would come up with conspiracy theories. It would it would I don't think I don't think at least in the if as far as God showing up in like the traditional senses we're talking about.
yeah.
Um, and I mean there is that argument that they had Jesus and look what they did with him. Uh, so but yeah, I don't think there would be I don't think there would be this great, uh you know, change of things, a great fixing of things or unifying of things. I think it would be you know, as best as I understand Revelations, it would be kind of a mess.
It
So,
would. It would. I just don't see how the success rate would be lower. It would have to be higher. And what I point to is that he had no problem doing it in the past. Like when Elijah was competing against other gods, it's like, well, if my God will show up, and God did. God showed up and vaporized all of the sacrifices. It's like, okay, so what makes Elijah and them so special? Like, how come we can't do it? It just it's odd to me. Like I don't know. It's just it's weird. But I
yeah,
just don't see how. Hmm?
you're exactly right. That is tough, and that is another thing that is hard to contend with is the Old Testament God, then the New Testament God, and then the God of today. Yeah, that is a tough thing to get your brain around. And I mean, a lot of this stuff I end up going to, stuff that I don't understand, and I just, and there's some stuff I'll just never understand.
Yeah.
Uh, there is there, and part of that I think is a good thing. I mean, it may come off as silly, but, and I'm sure you probably heard this, but I'm glad I don't understand everything that God does, because if I understood, you know, everything about God, why he does it, then he wouldn't necessarily be God,
Mhm.
because if that means I'm on the same level,
Yeah.
so there is that, my end of it.